When Emma Martinez walked down the aisle on that perfect June afternoon, she had no idea that the woman capturing every precious moment with her camera was about to commit the perfect crime. The photographer smiled warmly, adjusted her lens, and clicked away, documenting not just a wedding, but her next big score. And when the night ended, she would vanish into thin air, taking with her something far more valuable than anyone could have imagined. It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. Emma and David had planned every detail of their wedding for over a year. The venue was perfect, the flowers were beautiful, and the weather couldn't have been better. Saturday, June 15th, started like a dream at the Riverside Manor, a historic venue just outside Portland. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the bridal suite as Emma's bridesmaids fluttered around her, adjusting her veil and making sure every detail was absolutely perfect. That's when the photographer arrived. Her name was Claire Ashford, or at least that's what she told them. She came highly recommended through a wedding planning website with a portfolio that literally took Emma's breath away. The photos were stunning, intimate, artistic, and full of emotion. Exactly what Emma had been searching for. When they'd met for coffee 3 months earlier to discuss the wedding, Claire had been everything Emma wanted in a photographer. Professional but warm, creative but reliable, passionate about her craft but not pretentious about it. She'd shown them galleries of previous weddings on her tablet, each one more beautiful than the last. The couples in those photos looked so happy, so perfectly captured in their most precious moments. Emma had felt an instant connection. She just got it, you know? Emma would later tell police, her voice breaking with emotion. She understood exactly what I wanted. She talked about telling our story through images, about capturing the little moments that matter. She seemed so professional, so genuine. She had all the right equipment, knew exactly what she was doing. There was absolutely no reason to suspect anything was wrong. David had agreed. They'd paid the deposit that same week, $2,000 in cash as Claire had requested, explaining that it helped her avoid credit card processing fees and she could pass those savings on to her clients. It had seemed reasonable at the time. The morning of the wedding, Claire arrived right on schedule at 8 a.m., carrying professional camera bags and wearing the kind of stylish black outfit that wedding photographers always seem to wear. She greeted everyone with warm smiles and immediately got to work. She spent hours photographing the bridal preparations, capturing Emma's mother helping her into the dress, tears streaming down her face. She photographed the bridesmaids laughing together, champagne glasses raised in celebration. She documented every little detail. The shoes arranged just so, the delicate jewelry laid out on the dresser, the handwritten vows sitting in their elegant envelopes. She took shots of the getting ready room from every angle, the morning light streaming through the windows, the personal touches that made it uniquely Emma's space. Meanwhile, she also went to photograph the groom's preparations across the property. David and his groomsmen getting ready, nervous laughter and last-minute tie adjustments. His father's hand on his shoulder, a moment of quiet pride between them. She captured David checking his watch, the cufflinks that had belonged to his grandfather, the boutonniere being pinned to his lapel. All of it caught on camera, or so they thought. The ceremony itself was absolutely beautiful. 200 guests gathered in the garden as Emma walked down the aisle on her father's arm. David's eyes filled with tears the moment he saw her, and several guests later said they heard him whisper, "Wow," under his breath. The officiant's words were heartfelt and personal, weaving in stories about the couple that made everyone laugh and cry. Emma and David had written their own vows, promises that were so touching that everyone reached for tissues. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, and the whole scene looked like something out of a fairy tale. And through it all, Claire was everywhere, yet somehow invisible. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, capturing angles and moments that most photographers would miss. She climbed ladders for overhead shots of the ceremony. She knelt in the grass for unique perspectives of the processional. She positioned herself behind the officiant to catch the couple's faces as they said their vows. She seemed completely dedicated to her craft, utterly focused on giving Emma and David the wedding photos of their dreams. "I remember seeing her during the vows," David recalled months later, still trying to make sense of what had happened. "She was right up front, camera raised, getting every moment. I even smiled at her once because she was so engaged in what she was doing, so present. She smiled back, gave me this little nod like, 'I got you, don't worry.' I felt so confident that we were in good hands." That memory would haunt him later, the thought that he'd smiled at someone who was actively planning to betray them. After the ceremony, Claire orchestrated the family photos with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She knew exactly how to arrange large groups, how to position people so everyone was visible and the lighting was flattering. She had a natural talent for making people relax and smile genuinely, cracking little jokes and putting nervous family members at ease. She worked quickly but thoroughly, making sure she captured every combination of family members that Emma and David had requested. Grandparents with the couple, each side of the family separately, the entire extended family together, just siblings, just parents. She checked off every shot on their list. Then came the couple photos, and this was where Claire really seemed to shine. She took Emma and David to different spots around the venue, places she'd apparently scouted earlier, by the old oak tree where the dappled sunlight created a magical effect, near the fountain where the sound of water added romance to the moment, in the golden light of the late afternoon sun that made everything glow. She had them laugh together, hold each other close, whisper secrets, walk hand in hand. She climbed on benches and laid on the ground to get interesting angles. She was creating art, and everyone could see it. "This is going to be amazing," Claire told them with a warm, genuine-seeming smile. "These might be some of the best shots I've ever taken. You two are absolutely glowing. The love between you is it's so real, so beautiful. I can't wait for you to see these images." Emma had squeezed David's hand, thrilled at the thought of seeing their wedding through Claire's talented eyes. Those would be the last words Emma and David heard from their photographer. The reception started at 6 p.m. in the Manor's grand ballroom. The space had been transformed with twinkling lights and elegant centerpieces, each table decorated with flowers that matched Emma's bouquet. Guests found their seats as the DJ announced the arrival of the newlyweds. The first dance was magical, Emma and David swaying together while their song played, and everyone watched with happy tears. The toasts were touching and funny, with Emma's maid of honor telling embarrassing stories that made everyone laugh, and David's best man giving a speech so heartfelt that there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The food was delicious, the cake was beautiful, and the energy was joyful, and through it all, Claire kept shooting. She captured the cake cutting, getting close-ups of their hands together on the knife and wide shots of the guests gathered around watching. She photographed the father-daughter dance, Emma's dad trying not to cry as he twirled his little girl around the dance floor one last time as a Martinez. She shot the mother-son dance, the garter toss, the bouquet toss. She photographed guests laughing at their tables, children dancing with complete abandon, elderly couples swaying together slowly, their own long marriages evident in how perfectly they moved together. But Claire wasn't just photographing the celebration. She was working in a way that no one at the wedding could have understood. She took careful shots of the gift table, making sure the cards were visible and legible in her frames. She photographed close-ups of Emma's jewelry, the 3-carat engagement ring and the diamond earrings that had been her grandmother's. She took detail shots of expensive watches on guests' wrists, designer handbags left at tables, the luxury cars visible through the windows in the parking lot. She photographed name cards at tables, capturing first and last names of attendees. She shot the seating chart that listed guests and their relationships to the bride and groom. Several guests later mentioned seeing her working tirelessly. She was incredibly focused, one bridesmaid remembered when police interviewed her later. Always moving, always shooting. "Very professional. I noticed she wasn't eating or drinking, just working constantly. I actually felt a little bad for her, thinking she was going to be exhausted by the end of the night. I even offered to get her a glass of water at one point, but she politely declined and said she was fine. Another guest remembered Claire asking casual questions about where certain family members lived, what they did for work, how everyone knew the bride and groom. At the time, it had seemed like friendly conversation, maybe research for how to organize the photos later. In hindsight, it was something far more sinister. The last confirmed sighting of Claire Ashford was at approximately 9:30 p.m., about 3.5 hours into the reception. A groomsman remembered seeing her pack up one of her camera bags near the ballroom exit and carry it toward the door. He'd assumed she was taking equipment to her car, making room for the evening's final shots. "I didn't think anything of it," he said later, guilt evident in his voice even though he had no reason to feel responsible. Photographers have a lot of gear. It made sense that she'd make multiple trips. I even held the door open for her. She thanked me, said she'd be right back, and I went back to the party. But Claire never came back from that trip. She loaded her equipment into a sedan in the parking lot, careful to park in a spot where the security cameras had a limited view. She placed her bags in the trunk, got in the driver's seat, and drove away into the night. The license plates on her car had been obscured with mud, just enough to make them unreadable on the venue's security footage, but not so much that it would attract attention from police if she was pulled over. It was calculated, careful, and completely deliberate. Emma and David didn't notice the photographer's absence right away. They were caught up in their celebration, surrounded by loved ones, dancing and laughing and soaking in every moment of their perfect day. The reception went until midnight, and by the time they said goodbye to their last guests, they were exhausted and blissfully happy. They rode to their hotel in the vintage car they'd rented, Emma's head on David's shoulder, both of them talking about what an incredible day it had been. "The photos are going to be amazing," Emma had said, already imagining the leather-bound album they'd ordered, the prints they'd frame for their new home. David had agreed, saying he couldn't wait to see Claire's shots of Emma walking down the aisle, the moment that had taken his breath away. It wasn't until the next day that reality began to intrude. David tried calling Claire around noon, wanting to thank her for her incredible work and confirm when they could expect to see proofs. The number went straight to voicemail, but that didn't immediately concern him. She was probably sleeping in after the long night of work. He sent a text message, cheerful and grateful. No response. Emma tried emailing through the website where they'd originally found Claire, asking about the timeline for receiving their photos. The email bounced back immediately. User unknown. A small knot of worry began to form in Emma's stomach, but she pushed it down. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe Claire's email was having technical issues. Maybe her phone had died. They were leaving for their honeymoon in 2 days, a 2-week trip to Italy they'd been planning for months. Surely everything would be sorted out by the time they got back. By Monday, worry had turned to real panic. David called repeatedly, each call going straight to voicemail. Emma searched for Claire's business online, the professional photography company she'd claimed to own. Nothing came up. They looked for the wedding planning website where they'd originally found her portfolio, scrolling through pages and pages of photographer listings. Claire Ashford wasn't there. They searched for her personal social media, her business Facebook page, any trace of her online presence. Everything was gone, as if she'd never existed at all. The wedding planning website no longer had any listing for Claire Ashford. The professional photography website she'd shown them during their initial meeting, the one with the gorgeous portfolio and the glowing client testimonials. When they tried to access it, they got an error message. Domain not found. The email address, the phone number, the business name, the professional credentials she'd mentioned, all of it had vanished like smoke in the wind. And so had Claire. Emma felt sick. David felt furious and helpless at the same time. They canceled their honeymoon, unable to even think about going to Italy when their wedding photos, their memories, their trust had been stolen. When they went to the police station on Tuesday morning, Emma was shaking. They brought everything they had: the contract they'd signed, printed on professional-looking letterhead, the deposit receipt, handwritten but official seeming, copies of email correspondence where they'd discussed shot lists and timelines, business cards Claire had given them. But as Detective James Rodriguez looked through the documents spread across his desk, his expression grew more and more grim, and Emma knew the news was going to be bad. "I'm very sorry to tell you this," Detective Rodriguez said carefully, his years of experience evident in how gently he delivered devastating news. "The address on this contract is a mailbox rental facility in a strip mall across town. I called them already. The box was rented under a fake name and paid for in cash. It's been cleared out. The phone number is from a prepaid burner phone that's no longer in service. The business license number doesn't exist in any database I can access. The website domain was registered anonymously and has now been taken down. I'm truly sorry, but everything about Claire Ashford appears to be completely fake." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She felt David's hand grip hers tighter as the room seemed to spin slightly. "But we met with her," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Multiple times. We had coffee with her. She came to the venue for a site visit. She seemed so real, so professional, so genuine. She knew what she was talking about. She had thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment. How could all of it be fake?" Detective Rodriguez had seen this kind of thing before, though he had to admit never quite like this. "Scammers are getting more sophisticated every year," he explained, keeping his voice compassionate but honest. "They create entire false identities, complete with fake credentials and manufactured portfolios. They invest time in building trust, sometimes months of it. They're patient. They answer questions. They show up when they're supposed to, and then, when the moment is right, when they have what they need, they disappear. It's becoming more and more common, unfortunately. But this case was different in one crucial way that bothered Detective Rodriguez. Claire hadn't just taken their deposit and failed to show up, which was the typical wedding vendor scam. She'd done the entire job. She'd shown up early, worked for over 13 hours, delivered professional service the whole time, and then she'd vanished. Why would someone put in all that work just to steal the photos? What was the angle? As he dug deeper into the case over the following days, the truth would turn out to be far more disturbing than a simple photography scam. As the investigation deepened, the full scope of what had been taken became horrifyingly clear, and it was about so much more than just wedding photos. Claire's cameras had captured everything, and Detective Rodriguez began to realize she'd been far more strategic than it had initially appeared. She hadn't just been photographing a wedding. She'd been gathering intelligence. Those photos taken during the getting ready time showed the complete interior layout of Emma's parents' house, where the bridal party had prepared. Shots that appeared to be artistic detail photos actually showed car keys on tables with luxury car key fobs visible. Family photos on walls that revealed names, ages, and relationships. During the reception, Claire had photographed the gift table multiple times, and she'd been very deliberate about it. She captured the cards that contained checks and cash, making sure the amounts were visible, the signatures were clear, and the account numbers could be read. She had close-up shots of Emma's engagement ring from multiple angles, detailed enough that an appraiser could estimate its value. She'd taken photos of the jewelry box sitting on the bridal suite table, visible in the background of getting ready shots, showing exactly where valuables were stored. She was essentially casing multiple locations at once, Detective Rodriguez explained to Emma and David during a follow-up meeting, his voice grave. And not just the venue. She had access to personal information about your entire family, your friends, their homes, their valuables, their financial information. A wedding is actually a goldmine for identity theft and burglary if you think about it. Everyone's guard is down. People are celebrating. Important documents and valuables are visible. Guest lists provide names and relationships. And the photographer has access to absolutely everything, trusted completely because they're supposed to be there. The realization was absolutely horrifying. Emma's grandmother had written a check for $5,000 as a wedding gift, her shaky handwriting spelling out their names with so much love. It had been placed in a card on the gift table. Claire had photographed it, a clear shot that showed the entire check. Within a week of the wedding, that check was cashed at a check-cashing business in Nevada, 3 states away. The signature had been forged well enough that the business accepted it without question. But the grandmother's check was just the beginning. As word of the missing photographer spread through Emma and David's panicked social media posts and local news coverage, other victims began to come forward. And a disturbing pattern emerged that made Detective Rodriguez realize he wasn't dealing with an isolated incident. He was dealing with a serial criminal. There had been 3 other weddings in the past 18 months where photographers had disappeared under nearly identical circumstances. Different names each time: Claire Ashford, Michelle Bradford, Sarah Donovan. Slightly different looks, different styles, but the same basic method. Professional-seeming photographer with a stunning portfolio and glowing reviews. Everything communicated primarily through email. Payment in cash or check only, never credit cards. Shows up, does beautiful work, disappears afterward with all the photos. Within weeks of each wedding, bad things started happening to the victims. One couple, the Johnsons from Seattle, had their home broken into exactly 2 weeks after their wedding. The thieves knew the house layout perfectly as if they'd been there before. They knew exactly where the jewelry was kept, where the safe was hidden, and when the house would be empty because the couple had posted their honeymoon dates on social media. The thieves got away with over $40,000 in jewelry, cash, and electronics. Looking back, Mrs. Johnson realized the photographer had taken several shots in their master bedroom where they'd been getting ready. Shots that clearly showed the dresser where the jewelry had been stored and the closet where the safe was located. Another couple had their identities completely stolen. Credit cards were opened in their names within days of the wedding. Bank accounts were compromised. A mortgage application was submitted using their information. The breach was traced back to information that had been visible in close-up shots only the photographer would have had access to. Personal documents that had been sitting on tables during the getting-ready photos. A third couple found that checks from their wedding gifts were cashed fraudulently, just like Emma and David's. The photographer had captured clear images of every single check on the gift table, and one by one, they were forged and cashed at different locations across the country. "We're dealing with a professional criminal," Detective Rodriguez told his captain as he requested resources to form a task force. "Someone who's using wedding photography as a cover for identity theft, burglary, and fraud on a massive scale. This isn't about the photography deposits or even the photos themselves. Those are just bonuses. It's about access. A wedding photographer has complete access to everything. Homes during getting ready time, personal information, financial details, schedules, and everyone trusts them completely because they're a vendor you hired, a professional you're paying to be there." A multi-jurisdictional task force was formed, bringing together detectives from Oregon, Washington, and California. They worked together, comparing notes and evidence, looking for patterns. They analyzed the contracts, which were all slightly different but had similar vague language. They reviewed the fake websites, which had been created with stolen photos from real photographers. They examined email trails looking for digital fingerprints. They reviewed security footage from every venue where the suspected photographer had worked, and slowly, painstakingly, a picture began to emerge of who they were looking for. The woman, calling herself Claire Ashford, was likely in her mid to late 30s, though she'd been highly skilled at altering her appearance. At Emma's wedding, she'd worn her dark hair in a sleek bun, minimal makeup, and professional all-black attire. At another wedding 6 months earlier, witnesses described her as a redhead with glasses and a more casual, artistic style. At another, she'd had the blonde highlights and wore vintage-inspired dresses. She changed her look just enough that victims didn't immediately connect the cases when they saw each other's stories, but not so much that it raised suspicion at the actual events. She was clearly highly skilled with photography equipment, suggesting professional training or significant experience. She knew how to use professional cameras and lighting. She understood composition and timing. She could blend in seamlessly at upscale events. She was articulate, charming, and incredibly convincing. She knew exactly what to say to put anxious brides at ease, and she was very, very careful about covering her tracks. Security footage from Emma's wedding showed her leaving through a side exit at 9:30 p.m., carrying equipment bags that presumably held not just cameras but hard drives full of exploitable information. She loaded them into a dark blue or black sedan in the parking lot, parked strategically in a spot where the security cameras had a limited view. The license plates had been obscured with mud, carefully applied to look accidental but completely obscuring the numbers and letters. She never looked directly at any camera. She kept her head down at just the right angle. She knew where the cameras were. She drove away, and the trail went completely cold. The car was likely a rental or possibly even stolen. They never found it. She was gone, vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. For Emma and David, the loss went far beyond the stolen money or even the very real fear of identity theft and fraud. They'd frozen their credit, changed all their banking information, filed police reports, and taken every precaution they could think of. But none of that addressed the deeper wound. It was the memories that hurt the most, the violation of trust that felt almost unbearable. "Those photos were supposed to last forever," Emma said during a television interview, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. The local news station had asked them to share their story, hoping to warn other couples and maybe, just maybe, generate leads. "My grandmother passed away 2 months after our wedding. She had a stroke and was gone within days. The photos from our wedding day together were supposed to be something I'd treasure for the rest of my life. Her smile as she watched me get married, her dancing with my grandfather, her hugging me and telling me how proud she was. Now, I don't have a single professional image of her from that day. Someone stole my last good memories of my grandmother." "We have some photos from guest phones," David added, his arm around his wife, trying to hold himself together for her sake. "And we're so grateful for those. People have been incredibly kind, sending us every photo they took. But it's not the same. The professional shots, the moments we didn't even see because we were caught up in everything, the artistic images that were supposed to fill our album and hang on our walls, they're just gone. Someone stole our memories. They stole one of the most important days of our lives, and they did it while smiling at us, while we trusted them, while we were at our most vulnerable and happy." Their story resonated with thousands of people across the country. The local news coverage went national. Major networks picked it up. The story was shared millions of times on social media. Wedding photographers across the country were outraged that someone was using their profession for criminal purposes. Many offered to reshoot couple portraits for Emma and David for free, trying to give them something to salvage from the experience. A photographer in Portland donated her time to create a beautiful anniversary shoot for them. It was kind, and Emma and David appreciated it more than they could express. But it couldn't replace what was lost. It couldn't bring back the images of Emma's grandmother, or the candid moments of joy that could never be recreated. In the aftermath, wedding industry experts began warning engaged couples about red flags to watch for when hiring vendors, especially photographers. The signs had been there all along, they explained. Claire had only accepted cash or checks, never credit cards, which meant there was no paper trail and no way to dispute charges or trace transactions. She'd been somewhat reluctant to meet in person, preferring email communication where she could control the conversation and avoid being too memorable. Her contracts, while professional-looking, had been vague about specific deliverables and timelines. She'd had no real social media presence beyond the fake professional accounts created specifically for the scam. She'd never asked for a detailed shot list or spent much time discussing Emma and David's specific vision, which real photographers always do because they care about delivering what their clients want. A legitimate professional. Wants to understand your needs deeply, explained. Wedding planner Jennifer Santos in an industry blog post that went viral. They ask tons of questions. They show you complete galleries from recent weddings, not just highlight reels. They have an established presence in the community with real reviews from real people you can actually contact. They have a business address, not just a P.O. box. They use contracts with specific language and protections for both parties. They take credit cards because they're running a legitimate business. If someone seems too good to be true and doesn't check these boxes, trust your instincts. Ask for references and actually call them. Google the photographer's name plus the word scam or complaint. Reverse image search their portfolio to make sure they didn't steal photos from other photographers. It takes a little extra time, but it can save you from devastating loss. The advice was solid, but for Emma and David and the other victims, it came too late. They lived with the consequences every day. Emma couldn't look at the few phone photos from their wedding without feeling a wave of grief and anger. David had nightmares about confronting Claire, about demanding answers for why she did this to them. They went to therapy to process the trauma, because that's what it was. Trauma. A violation of trust that cut deep. As months passed and the investigation continued, Detective Rodriguez remained committed to finding the woman behind the crimes. He worked the case in every spare moment, following leads across state lines, coordinating with FBI agents who'd gotten involved due to the interstate nature of the fraud. They'd connected her to at least 7 weddings now, possibly more. The documented theft and fraud totaled over $150,000, but the real cost to victims was incalculable. Stolen memories, violated trust, identity theft, burglaries, fear. But despite the task force's best efforts, despite the national media attention, despite the thousands of tips that came in from people who thought they'd seen her, the woman who called herself Claire Ashford remained a ghost. She'd simply vanished, presumably living under yet another false identity, maybe in another state, maybe even another country. Detective Rodriguez believed she was still out there, lying low for now but probably planning her next move. She's smart, patient, and experienced, he told Emma and David during one of their regular check-ins. He'd become personally invested in the case, wanting justice for these victims who'd had something so precious stolen from them. She'll wait until she thinks enough time has passed, until she thinks it's safe. And then she'll do it again. Weddings are too lucrative a target for someone like her to stop completely. The access is too good. The trust is too easy to gain. The payoff is too high. The thought that she might be out there targeting new victims made Emma feel physically ill. She'd joined online groups for engaged couples, posting warnings about what had happened to her. She shared the story over and over, hoping to prevent even one other couple from experiencing what she and David had gone through. Some people thanked her. Others thought she was being paranoid or overly dramatic, insisting that their photographer was different, was trustworthy, had great reviews. Emma hoped they were right, but she knew firsthand how convincing a scammer could be. Emma and David tried to move forward with their lives as best they could. They celebrated their first anniversary quietly, with dinner at home and a small ceremony where they renewed their private vows to each other. They'd had the anniversary photo shoot that the kind Portland photographer had donated, and the images were lovely. But they weren't the same. They couldn't be. The spontaneous joy of their actual wedding day could never be recreated. They'd taken every precaution against identity theft, monitoring their credit religiously, changing passwords and account numbers, being hyper-vigilant about their personal information. So far, they'd been lucky. No fraudulent charges. No stolen checks beyond the one from Emma's grandmother. Maybe Claire had gotten spooked by the media attention. Maybe they'd simply been a smaller score than other victims. They'd never know. "I hope she's caught," Emma said quietly one evening, sitting with David on their couch, scrolling through a news article about yet another wedding vendor scam. "Not just for us, but for all the other couples who might become victims. No one should have their wedding day stolen like this. No one should have to wonder if the person they trusted with their most precious memories was actually a criminal, watching them and calculating the whole time. No one should have to explain to their future children that they don't have professional photos from their parents' wedding because they were stolen by a con artist. David pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. They'd gotten through this together, and their marriage was strong despite, or maybe because of, the trauma they'd faced right from the start. But the wound was still there. Every time they saw a wedding announcement, every time a friend got engaged and asked for vendor recommendations, every time they thought about the album they should have had and the memories that should have been preserved forever, the wound was still there. The case remains open. Detective Rodriguez still gets occasional leads, tips from people who think they've spotted someone matching the description at weddings or photography expos. Each one is investigated thoroughly. Each one leads nowhere. The woman is too careful, too practiced at disappearing. She's probably changed her appearance again. She might have left the country. She might have switched to a different con entirely. Or she might be out there right now, scrolling through wedding planning websites, creating a new false identity, designing a new fake portfolio, preparing to steal another couple's most precious memories. The case of the disappearing wedding photographer serves as a stark reminder in our digital age. Trust must be earned and verified, not given freely just because someone has a nice website and says the right things. References must be checked thoroughly, not just glanced at. Contracts must be detailed and legitimate, reviewed by people who know what to look for. Vendors should be verified through multiple sources, their credentials confirmed, their online presence examined carefully. And if something feels off, even slightly, even in a way you can't quite articulate, listen to that instinct. It's probably trying to tell you something important. Because sometimes the person holding the camera isn't just capturing memories. They're stealing them. They're stealing your joy, your trust, your financial security, and your peace of mind. They're turning what should be the happiest day of your life into something tainted by betrayal and loss. And they're doing it with a smile, with professionalism, with charm and skill honed by practice. Emma and David's wedding day was supposed to be perfect. In many ways it was. They married the love of their life. They celebrated with everyone who mattered to them. They danced and laughed and made promises they intended to keep forever. But when they close their eyes and try to remember the details, there's a gap where the photos should be, a void where the memories should have been preserved. And in that void stands a woman with a camera and a smile, a woman whose real name they'll probably never know, a woman who saw their joy and saw only opportunity. That's the real crime when you think about it. Not just the theft of photos or money or information, but the theft of innocence, of trust, of the belief that people are basically good and that professionals can be relied upon. Claire Ashford, or whatever her real name is, didn't just steal images. She stole something far more precious. She stole the ability to look back on what should have been a perfect day without feeling violated. And somewhere out there, she's probably doing it again.